This keeps coming up. If what the president says is so bad, and this isn't just about this election, this has been true all along, but if what he says is so bad, why do they have to lie about it? The president has never taken the position that legally cast ballots should not be counted. But here's ABC News putting someone on TV who's making exactly that claim. Play 14.
He's been claiming this would be a rigged election since then, George. He has been ramping up these claims leading into Election Day this time around. One of the things that he is doing, he is attacking these early votes and saying that they are all primarily Democratic votes. And they are, because Democrats historically have come out to vote early, absentee mail-in ballots. But you've got to remember, President Trump repeatedly told his supporters not to vote early, to vote in person, because he didn't trust the system. George, we get accused time and time again by this administration of being fake news, but I gotta say, what I'm gonna tell you right now, there is nothing fake about it. What we witnessed today was factually disturbing by the President of the United States. The remarks that he made strike at the core, the foundation of our democracy. And when we are at a time in this divided nation, when votes are still being counted, the president is saying that the voices of Americans who cast their votes legally do not matter. That is nothing short of dangerous.
He didn't say that. The president has never said, she's actually telling you what I'm saying is not fake news, comma, and then she gives you fake news. That's very on brand for ABC, I understand, but that's how you have to think of these journos. They will explicitly go out of their way to say, look, I know you might not trust me all the time, but you got to trust me on this one. And then they'll say something untrustworthy and untrue. It is not the position of the president. It is not the position of his campaign, of the Republican Party, that legally cast ballots should not be counted. Not what he's saying. But he is asking questions about highly suspicious stuff going on and wants to make sure that illegally cast ballots, which certainly were cast, we already know were cast. It's just a question of where and how much. Or is the Democrat position that there were no mistakes and no election fraud whatsoever with hundreds of millions of people voting in this country? Is that really the position? Because that's stupid, right? We all understand that's nonsense. There's no way that's accurate, but that is what they're going to say. That is what you're going to be hearing. So just keep that in mind. What they're telling you does not make any sense. Oh, and I had mentioned before how the COVID situation played such a big role in this, and it absolutely did, getting us even to this point. I mean, Donald Trump should have wiped the floor with Joe Biden in an election in a normal year in America. I don't just mean even a normal year for Trump, just a normal year in America. But we got a pandemic. The media terrified everybody, told us to hide in our homes, really gave a kick in the face to the economy, although it is coming back. And they'll say things like this on MSNBC, which is just an absurd propaganda network. Play clip 10.
Well, this is my hope, and maybe it's a futile hope. But now that the election is over and the administration's policy on election, on COVID doesn't change the election results, maybe this administration will start to take appropriate actions right away. If it doesn't, we are in for a very, very difficult time. And if we have to wait till January, I think it's reasonable to quote the director of the National Institutes of Health, to saying there may be 1 million of our fellow Americans that die of this winter. So this is not something to take lightly. I hope that regardless of which way the election goes, now that the election is over, the electioneering aspects of COVID management give way to the public health management of a really serious crisis.
1 million people will die. This MD is on national television saying, if Joe Biden doesn't end up the winner of this disputed election. This is now a disputed election. Let's call it what it is. But he's out there to spread the same propaganda that got us even to this point. 1 million people die. What is Joe Biden going to do that would save 1 million lives this winter? A national mask mandate? Anyone who says that is a moron. A moron. There's no basis for this whatsoever. It's going to save 1 million lives? First of all, Why would we think that 1 million people are even going to die over the course of the winter? That wouldn't happen if we did nothing. That would not happen under any circumstance at this point. You've already had the disease spread to millions and millions and millions of Americans who will have some degree of antibody resistance to it, as well as cross T-cell immunity to it. And you have a vaccine that's weeks away that the new administration, if it happens, is going to inherit. They'll give no credit to the Trump team for pulling it off. But, yeah, that's where we'll be. That's what they'll be telling you. Anything they can do, anything that's possible for them at this phase, to just give that one last push, that one last, appeal. And then all of a sudden, COVID will be manageable because Joe Biden listens to the science. Joe Biden doesn't know anything about science. He's an idiot. He's not a smart man. He doesn't understand anything. He doesn't have good judgment. He's just a Democrat talking points machine who's been around forever, is way past his prime. I mean, Democrats, let me tell you this, they're not going to enjoy playing defense on a Biden administration. I can tell you that much. It's going to be laughable. We'll get more into that later. But I don't want to get too deep into that because I haven't yet given up that Trump is going to pull this off. I'm not saying it's likely, but I haven't given up hope that Trump is going to pull this thing off. Speaking of fake news, Fake Tapper. Among the kings of fake news, or at least the kings of fraudulent news, because he pretends that he's a journalist, and we all know he's a Democrat hack and also a giant jackass in real life. Here he is making exactly the wrong claim about who always says that it's not fair when they lose. Play 11.
What a sad night for the United States of America to hear their president say that, to falsely accuse people of trying to steal the election, to try to attack democracy that way with this feast of falsehoods. Lie after lie after lie about the election being stolen. No evidence for what he's saying, just smears about the integrity of vote counting in state after state. When he wins a state, it's legitimate. When he loses, it's because the vote is being stolen from him. It's not true. It's ugly. It's frankly pathetic.
Is what Jake Tapper said intellectually defensible? Let's take a moment here. Oh, he's emoting. He cares so much about democracy. Sure, he does. Are we He says when he loses a state, it's stolen. Really? Did we say that California is stolen? Trump lost that one. No. Did we say New York is stolen? No. Did we say that a number of other places that went blue? No, of course not. So that's just a factually untrue statement. Fake Tapper. What do we have a problem with? Places where Trump was winning, and then all of a sudden, vote counting stops the night of the election, and everyone wakes up the next day, and oh, look at this, we got all these new votes. All these new votes for Biden. And now Biden's the winner in the state. Oh, look at that. We're not allowed to ask questions about that? Not allowed to think that something's going on? Oh, also there's no evidence for any fraud in the election. I guess Jake Tapper believes that dead people vote. Because we already have evidence that dead people voted. So he must really believe that there are necromancers walking around. There are people who can raise people from the dead to go in and mail in their ballot on behalf of the Joe Biden presidency. Gee, I don't know. I wonder. In every presidential election, there are instances, there are cases of fraud, but you're being gaslit right now by being told there's no fraud. The question is not whether any fraud happened. The question is, was there enough fraud? Was it systemic enough that the election results changed because of it? But what they're doing is taking in the far other direction by claiming that there's no reason to believe that there was any fraud whatsoever. That's crazy. That's not credible. But they think as a tactic it'll work, because then anybody who says, hold on a second, I've got questions, are you one of those bad people that's questioning the results of this election? No, I'm one of the good people who just wants to get to the truth. And if the truth says that Joe Biden won this election, I will accept that the Democrats managed to pull off just the most BS nonsense campaign imaginable to get this guy who should have a blanket over his knees, feeding squirrels peanuts by hand, thinking about, seeing his grandkids again, which is fine. But that guy is going to be the leader of the free world now. Okay. That's what they're telling us. Not yet there where I'm going to accept it, but eventually we may have to accept it. And I'm going to tell you this much. They do not realize, Democrats still have not figured out how much they have radicalized their political opponents to understand we're just going to play the game with the same intensity and ferocity, not the same immorality and willingness to cheat and lie, but the same intensity and ferocity that the other side does. No more gentlemanly handshake before the boxing match, and we're throwing haymakers for their heads. That's how we're going to do this now. It's not going to be, but we want them to think nice thoughts about us. Maybe the New York Times will say that, there's a bipartisan spirit that's reanimated the GOP. No way. They're going to put forward this multi-time presidential loser just because they think that they could kind of use the apparatus to fool people into thinking he's going to be some moderate candidate. It's going to be, this administration is going to be faced with an opposition that's just going to neuter it from the beginning. From the beginning. And they're going to complain and whine about obstruction and everything else, but maybe they shouldn't have run on lots of bad ideas that if the American people really understood what those ideas were going to look like under a Biden administration, he pretends that that's not him, that he's not, it's like he's not even really a Democrat. If people knew what was going to happen and what the party would be pushing for, I don't think they would have been able to go and vote for him, but we shall see. I recently got a crash course in home title theft. You better pray this crime never happens to you because it comes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's how it works. You may not know this, but your home's title exists online. It's up there in the cloud. It's stored on servers. Cyber thieves hack in, kick you off using a quitclaim deed, put themselves on, and take loans out against your home. You often won't find out about this until the payment notices arrive or you receive a foreclosure notice in the mail. You have to go with the experts I trust to create a virtual barrier around your home's title with Home Title Lock. Just go to HomeTitleLock.com, use the promo code RADIO. That will get you 30 free days of protection. You can also check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. The usual identity theft services do not protect you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take action today. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO.
Good evening. I'd like to provide the American people with an update on our efforts to protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late.
That's the basic premise of the Trump team right now, and that's why they're asking for recounts and going to the courts. There's nothing wrong with him saying that. I mean, Democrats can complain about this all day. They can complain about this as much as they want. But at the end of the day, the president is completely in the right here to bring up the problems that we've seen in this election. And his team firmly believes that legal votes will favor him. And they say they have reason to believe that the changes that have happened here are not indicative of what the real will of the people has been, as evidenced in this election. Play 21.
Detroit and Philadelphia, known as two of the most corrupt political places anywhere in our country, easily cannot be responsible for engineering the outcome of a presidential race, a very important presidential race. In Pennsylvania, Democrats have gone to the state Supreme Court to try and ban our election observers, and very strongly.
Why would they want to get rid of election observers? Does anyone even want to hazard a guess about that? Why would they want to prevent people from having access when that is federally speaking, both parties are allowed to have, it's a federal law, both parties are allowed to have access to polling places to be observers. It's all about creating integrity and the perception of fairness in the system. So why are Democrats fighting that? What possible reason could they have for trying to block poll watchers? Well, I think when we start to answer that question, we all see that there's no good answer. We all understand. And that's why the president's saying, sorry, this is not going to happen. Not going to allow this. Not going to go down without a fight. Play 22.
Our goal is to defend the integrity of the election. We'll not allow the corruption to steal such an important election, or any election for that matter. And we can't allow anybody to silence our voters.
Can't allow anybody to silence our voters. Allowing illegal votes cancels out legal votes. It is absolutely necessary for this system to be implemented and enforced as the laws state. Democracy in this context, it's a process. And unless the process is as planned and fair to both sides, the whole system collapses. It doesn't matter anymore. Just the act of voting is meaningless if people who should not be able to vote have their votes counted. And that's what the Democrats are refusing to accept or to understand right now. That's the problem. And they're even saying that that Trump is, of course, this, they'll always go to this, that Trump is racist because he has concerns about this vote count. Play 15.
Why is he talking about Detroit? Why is he talking about Philadelphia? Yeah. It's not subtle. It's race. It's race. It's Donald Trump's go-to play, and it's disgusting. So I just want to say that.
I appreciate you teeing it up. It's unbelievable that he can say these cities are known for corruption, et cetera, et cetera. There's corruption all across this country, in every institution. Why are you singling out these two black cities? Why are you denying the victory that these people have fought for? I'm upset about it because African Americans have fought so hard for the right to vote. I just want to finish. African Americans and our allies have fought so hard for the right. This right to vote for us is precious. John Lewis died this year. This is something we went and we got young African Americans across this country to believe, to buy in, to stand in line, to do this thing, and have the President of the United States crap all over their efforts. It hurt. And you can say he didn't mean it to be racial, but it feels racial to us.
He definitely doesn't mean it to be racial, but they take the cheap shot anyway. Philadelphia does have a history of corrupt elections, as evidenced by the federal prosecution in May of this year that I told you about, where somebody was straight up making fake ballots or making fake votes up, filling out empty ballots for one candidate or another. And there was money involved. There was political consultants involved. Detroit, the same thing. You know, when people refer to the corruption of Tammany Hall in New York during that era, they're just referring to the fact that everybody knew it was corrupt. Chicago politics, a lot of corruption. A lot of people go to prison for corruption there. But he's talking about Detroit and Philadelphia because those are the main Democrat-controlled cities in states that are determining this election right now. And yes, they both have histories of corruption. And they also forget this. The Trump administration, or the Trump campaign, rather, is so racist somehow that they managed to set records for the GOP for Black and Latino support. I guess the mainstream media is just going to pretend like that didn't happen. They're just going to continue with one of the most unfounded and vicious lies about Trump of all, that he's a racist. They can't ever change that. That was their favorite thing to say for 4 years about this president, and it was all a lie. What happens now in this fight, my friends? That is our focus, and to help us dial right into it, we've got our buddy Will Cardella in the mix. He is from the Washington Examiner. You can read their latest coverage of it at WashingtonExaminer.com. Will, my friend, how are you feeling right now about all this? What's going on?
I'm tired. I'm tired of staying up late at night. I'm tired of looking at the results change. I'm tired of all the the back and forth here. I'm tired of legacy media and how they're reporting on this. I'm tired of social media restricting anybody but legacy media reporting on this. It's tiresome.
So how do you think the campaign's legal challenges are stacking up so far? I mean, are you at the point where you believe we have evidence of fraud, or that we just are concerned about the possibility of fraud?
I think, well, let me start by saying, look, voter fraud happens virtually every election. I think the question here is there's a difference between voter fraud and election fraud. Election fraud is during the process of counting ballots and so on. Voter fraud is people filling out mail-in ballots illegally and submitting them. So the question here is not whether there's voter fraud, it's how much voter fraud there was, and if that voter fraud happened, did it sway or affect the outcome of this election? That's why we're going through these processes. Now, there's nothing wrong with challenging that. There's nothing wrong with going to the courts and doing it. If Donald Trump loses, at least we know where some of this fraud is occurring. We can help expose it and have a more transparent process the next time. Florida had no problem calling this election. Florida was the contested state in 2000. They had all their ballots counted. It was an orderly process, and they called the race, well before 11 p.m. or shortly thereafter. That's how it should be done. The fact that it's not done in Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania is an absolute travesty. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should be outraged.
Yeah, when we see what's gone on here with even in Arizona, all the delays in counting, isn't it fair to ask? If people keep trying to suggest if they like the outcome, which right now with Biden ahead in key states, they do like the outcome. Media is suggesting this is all totally normal. No, it's not totally normal. I mean, you've got places that are saying, oh, yeah, our numbers were wrong. We found new ballots. We're delaying this. We had a pipe burst. We sent poll watchers away, but then we kept counting. That's not normal.
Another thing that shouldn't be understated, whether you like Trump or not, he exposed the media for the propaganda fraud that they are. He exposed these institutions for the frauds that they are. The Democratic Party started an investigation with no predication, no evidence, against a sitting president, a duly elected president, in order to get him impeached. So no one trusts the Democratic Party. No one trusts our institutions, the FBI, the DOJ. The Democrats and the media have no place to say, oh, voter fraud didn't happen, election fraud. They don't have no credibility anymore. The pollsters have no credibility. I mean, these people should be shunned. They shouldn't be listened to anymore. Let's let the process work itself out. Let's make sure every legal vote cast is counted, and let's see where the chips fall. But this stuff has to be exposed. Trump exposed all these other things. Let's see if he can expose what's going on at the local levels if there's fraud going on.
I mean, you look in Philadelphia, and we're speaking to Will Cardella now of the Washington Examiner. You look at what's going on in Philadelphia, Will, and to think that this was all, I mean, is the media's line on this that this was all done exactly as it should be, and there's nothing to even look at? Because that's so absurd, but it does seem to be what we're supposed to believe.
Of course, and they set this up long before the election happened. If you remember, big tech was censoring anything about possible mail-in voter fraud. The New York Post came out and attacked actually my reporting on possible voter fraud and things that have happened. They didn't refute it. They just came out and said that it was wrong. This has happened a lot. Heritage has a database of all the voter fraud that's happened. Not one person ever refuted it. It was just, oh, this is impossible and it's not going to happen. So this has been a long concocted narrative that, hey, this is all going to work out. There's certainly no voter fraud. There's no election fraud. And, the election's going to be fair. All these ballots in Pennsylvania, these last-minute rule changes that take an election out of the hands of legislators and giving them to rogue courts. Now you have people accepting ballots with bad postage and signatures that don't match in Pennsylvania. It's an outright, absolute mess, and it's a joke, and people should call it for what it is.
Are there any other areas, any other places specifically you're looking at state-wise right now where you think if we do get the transparency that the Trump campaign is demanding, where we may get a changed result based on legally counted ballots in that state? I mean, I'll just say Pennsylvania for me, and I'm talking to people on the ground there, and that place is a mess, and there's definitely the possibility of that thing flipping back to the Trump column in the end. What other states are top of the list for you at this point?
You know, I refrain from saying it. I have a reliable source in Arizona that says that Arizona is likely to go to Trump by about 10 to 20,000 votes. I heard that yesterday. I'm not seeing it pan out as of now, but I do trust him. He was involved in these statewide elections and so on. So I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona went Trump. Again, I'm not seeing it bear out in the numbers as of yet. So look, there's nobody really knows for sure. If anybody says that they do, again, they're lying. Pennsylvania is going to be tough. It's really close. We have the ballot problems because the Supreme Court refused to rule on whether ballots should be accepted by Election Day, like the legislature said. Moreover, ballots that have signatures that don't match or postage, or incorrect postage, may be accepted. So that's going to be a mess even after. There's probably going to be court challenges, and some of those may be thrown out. We don't know yet.
What do you think the biggest takeaways are for the Democrat Party? Let's put aside whether Biden wins or loses. Based on what we've already seen in the House races, Senate races, and the overall trend in this election, what do you think we learned about the Democrat Party?
I mean, they'll win at all costs, and they're good at it. Look, the COVID narrative of everybody's going to die from COVID, that didn't sway the electorate like they thought. You know, Trump won seniors and Florida, he won seniors in Georgia. But what it did do is give them cover. It gave Gavin Newsom and Andrew Cuomo cover to shut down the economy, to hijack it, to take it from Trump. And that's likely what swayed this election. It also allowed them to change the election rules in the last minute on the fly and talk to people about mail-in ballots where most of the fraud occurs. A majority of the election changes helped Democrats. And the COVID narrative gave them the cover to do it. We know that elections are safe. In Wisconsin, there was one in April. The media predicted that everybody in the entire world was going to die. It would even kill the last of the bacteria. That election went off without a hitch. This one would have went off without a hitch. But there was a coordinated effort between the media and the propagandizers and the Democratic Party to have it their way, and they got it. And I mean, I'm talking courts overruling legislatures. These are activist courts at the state level, much like what happens with activist courts at the federal level, telling legislatures, who are the ultimate deciders on how elections are run, those are the body of the people, and they speak for the people, overturning the will of the people in these states. And that's why we don't have election results, and that's why the borders have all been muddied.
Do you think we're learning anything particularly interesting about who really supports President Trump and his agenda among the GOP? I'm talking about right now, and who is ready to tuck tail and run at the first moment, or actually just start measuring the new GOP for they think they're going to be hanging the drapes, so to speak.
Well, this is going to be interesting. Look, this election, if Trump loses, was a massive repudiation of socialists and the Democratic policy agenda. Down ballot, Republicans did really well, gaining in the House, retaining the Senate. They didn't, much like Obama in 2012, people liked Obama but didn't like his policies. If this bears out, in 2020, people didn't like Trump, but they liked his policies. So there's kind of a flip there. So, in New York and local elections, you may know this, Buck, there was a bloodbath for Democrats. They do not like the lockdowns. So Biden coming into the White House, he looks pretty weak. He looks like a lame duck. He's not the future of this party. You're going to see progressives fight it out. You're already seeing him go after Nancy Pelosi. Americans don't want socialism. Progressives are going to push it on the country. And you're likely going to see a Republican wave in 2022 where they win back the House. Biden's not going to be able to push any of his massive systemic changes like packing the courts, adding states, getting rid of the Electoral College, whatever other those radical agendas are. They're dead in the water. So look, everything that's happening right now, if a Trump doesn't win, is not bad for the Republican Party. Obviously Republicans want Donald Trump to win, but I'm saying it's just not the end of the world if he does. Biden won't be able to get much done, and he's going to govern as a centrist.
And isn't it nice that we're at least able to look around, and Republicans right now Trump is behind right now, and it's not looking good, but it's not over, as I've been saying on the show today. But we're not rioting, we're not looting, and we know that our team is not going to do that. And if anyone does that, if there's a little moron here or there who thinks they're going to become violent or something, everyone on our side is going to shout them down, want the cops to take out the billy club and lock them up as soon as possible. No one's going to be whining about it. So at least we go into this knowing we are still the civilized side of things, Will.
Yeah, and to actually answer your previous question, there are people on the Republican side, it's not just rioting, but are tucking and running, like Chris Christie, Marco Rubio, some of these guys who are, Rick Santorum, some of these guys who are positioning themselves. They don't know where the Republican Party's going, so there's already positioning going on. Ted Cruz is fighting, Rand Paul is fighting, even Mitch McConnell saying every legal vote needs to be counted in these states and so on. So look, you're going to see a lot of this positioning going on within the Republican Party, who's going to be the next leader and so on, and that's why you're seeing some of these people dump Trump so quickly, in as much as I think they want to retain a lot of his positives and they want to dump some of his negatives for the next election. But, we really got to see where it goes. Are they going to pick the establishment mentality, or are they going to continue to go through the door that, Trump swung open and fight back? I think Donald Trump's biggest problem was he was a counterpuncher, and people really liked that. But his counterpunches were thrown with his eyes closed, and he often hit the wrong target and tired everyone out. So, the Republican Party is looking to change, but Donald Trump is probably the best thing to happen to them in a century. So they have a blueprint to win blue dog Democrats, and they have a blueprint to do it for a long time to come.
Will Rick Cardella, everybody, Washington Examiner. Follow him on social media. Will, always good to have you on, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Buck.
I think a lot of people are going to turn to what happened to the Democratic Party. Yeah. There is no way to put this other than to say this election was Joe Biden winning looks like a one-off. This election, for the most part, was an absolute repudiation of the Democratic Party as a brand. Their brand doesn't work across most of America. It just doesn't.
Here you have Joe Scarborough saying something that almost makes sense or is close to being correct for the first time in a long time. But what's really going on is you're going to see a lot more of this, and this goes into the discussion we've been having already this hour about how people are jockeying now for what they think is going to be a new GOP, and new roles, and new media prominence, and everything else, that the Trump era is coming to an end here. And that they'll finally be able to turn around and say, oh, yes, no, we oppose the Democrats. I'm sorry. People like Joe Scarborough worked to get Joe Biden elected. They were on Biden's team. You don't get to switch teams when you defeat the Republican Party and say, oh, but now I want to be a leader of the Republican Party. Now I want Republicans to trust me and like me again. That's not going to fly. At least not on my watch. I don't know. Maybe some people will buy into that. I mean, I know the Never Trumpers must be overjoyed at this moment. I do. I give someone like Ted Cruz a lot of credit. He's got his personal issues with the president, but Ted Cruz understood the agenda and the movement mattered more than any personal petty feud. And for 4 years, he had the president's back when it mattered on big issues. He really did, and he still does now. Even in this phase, I think we should all pay very close attention to who fights and who wants to cut and run already. And you're seeing it, these GOP establishment style figures. What do they think is really going to happen? Everyone's going to forget. If Trump doesn't end up winning, everyone's going to forget what we've learned over the last 4 years, what we've seen the opposition is willing to do. I mean, they changed voting procedures in an election year to benefit themselves. And we're thinking, oh, yeah, let's listen to the GOP figures who say, let's take a moderate approach and try to win these Democrats back to our side. I don't think so. But that's what they're going to do now. You're going to have these so-called moderate GOP voices who were Democrats to get Biden elected, now trying to position themselves as reasonable and as part of the new Republican Party. Although they're going to have to not say stuff like this. Here's Scarborough again. I just think it's interesting that this guy is allegedly a Republican, works at MSNBC, and all he does is trash Trump. Anyway, fascinating stuff. Here's what he says about Biden. Play 5.
Just like Bill Clinton governed, and just like Bill Clinton, Joe Biden knows how to govern. So he will govern from the middle. He will make deals. People on the far left and far right won't like it. But
yeah, Joe Biden, such a great deal maker, such a leading figure, even in the Democrat Party. This guy was just along for the ride with Obama for 8 years. But he will hopefully be limited in how much damage he can do as a result of the Senate being in Republican hands. And there was something of a repudiation of the Democrat brand. I mean, the fact that Democrats in a pandemic year like this, in the election year, for there to be a once-in-a-century pandemic, and they could only squeak out maybe. I know, guys, I can't just keep talking about the maybes. We got to start talking about the what if down the line here on both sides, right? We can't just keep focusing on, well, we don't know. I know we don't know. The smarter Democrats are beginning to understand that wokeness and the extreme left approach of so many in their party is a total turnoff, is a real deal breaker for a lot of people the Democrats are going to need on their side in the next election, right? And there was this relentless campaign of demonization against Donald Trump for 4 years from 95% of the media. It's amazing, actually, that so many folks came out and voted for him, given that we're supposed to get our information from the news media. So one of the great positives of all of this, no matter what, news media is mortally wounded. It's never coming back the way that it was before. Now the fight's really against big tech, and that's going to be more of a struggle. But the mainstream media, it's a joke, folks. Oh, ABC News, they're just journos, please. Democrat clowns. CNN, MSNBC, Democrat clowns. Washington Post, New York Times, same thing. We all know it. We all see it. Why go to them for your information? They're not even doing real journalism. They're doing opinion based upon the same fact sheet that's available to anybody with an internet connection.